go ahead and get started. So my name is Emily Silence. I'm the Development Associate at Potomac Riverkeeper Network, and today we're going to be talking about water monitoring for evidence and advocacy. So if you have any questions, feel free to type them into the chat box, and we'll have 15, 20 minutes at the end to go through questions, talk about anything else that we haven't covered. So I'm going to let our president, Nancy Stoner, introduce Brent. Nancy?
Very good. So thank you everybody for joining us today. I definitely see some people who are Potomac Riverkeeper Network regulars, including Lisa and Carl, who run our water quality monitoring program. So thank you to both of you. And then some new faces. So thanks everybody for joining us today. I'm definitely looking forward to learning a lot from Brent in this presentation today, which looks really fascinating. So I just want to tell you, for those of you who are new, just a little bit about the Potomac Riverkeeper Network. So we are a riverkeeper organization. It's part of the Waterkeeper Alliance, which has more than 350 member groups all around the world. And our group, like all the others, focuses on protecting the rivers. The rivers we protect are the Potomac and the Shenandoah. Brent, from whom you're going to hear today, is the Upper Potomac Riverkeeper. We also have a Potomac Riverkeeper, Dean Nyox, and a Shenandoah Riverkeeper, Mark Frondorf. And we have almost 15,000 acres that they protect with the assistance of our legal director and others in the organization. The main thing we do is protect the public's right to clean water. And we do that by stopping pollution and then also enhancing access. I think Brent's going to focus primarily today on the stopping pollution part of our mission, which is actually the bigger part of what we do. I think the part that we're the most proud of. The riverkeepers are the experts in the rivers they protect. They're the eyes and ears and the voice of the rivers, and they are great advocates for the rivers and stopping the pollution that interferes with our use and enjoyment. Brent is a national expert. He is the expert in using drones to gather evidence about water pollution for the Waterkeeper Alliance, and is training waterkeepers around the world in how to do that. But he's also going to talk about other ways, more traditional ways of gathering evidence and as well, and using that for advocacy to stop pollution. So I want to turn it over to Brent and thank you again. We're going to have time for Q&A at the end, and this is a small enough group that hopefully we can actually have some discussion at the end. So please put your questions in the chat, and we'll pick them up at the end. Okay, thanks.
All right. Thank you, Nancy, and thank you everyone for joining me. I'm quite surprised that there's so many people on Zoom today with its 60-degree weather outside, because I walked outside and I said, oh, is that a warm breeze? Oh my, I don't want to jinx it. Could be spring around the corner. Anyway, so yes, thank you for joining me. Water monitoring for evidence and advocacy. This is very much going to be a PowerPoint about what we do in general about monitoring, and the we is an important context here, because there is a greater we, a universe of we. Why do we monitor and collect water monitoring data? And there's a whole host of number of reasons why nonprofits and government agencies and researchers collect water monitoring data. Condition of the water body. They want to assess the impact of aquatic species a lot of times. A big one is educate public and decision makers, identify the source of pollution of a water body. That's a popular one that we like to dive into. Looking at human health impacts, and actually evidence for legal action, and even state agencies and federal agencies also collect water data for potential legal action. So we will get into that on how we that as well. But in the smaller we, the community-based organizations, I've been a riverkeeper for about 15 years. I developed a water monitoring program on the Eastern Shore and with the Chester River Association. And the four basic reasons why community groups want to collect data is, they see a decline in health. from a stream, and they want to know what's going on. They want to know why it's declining. So they're going to start a monitoring program. They want to assess the health of the stream before some kind of pollution event is going to occur, a development project or some industry that's changing, that kind of thing. And in general, environmental stewardship, wanting just to engage the community with their environment to, get the community to understand where their water is and what the water quality is like. And it's just a good opportunity to get volunteers out in the watershed. And another one, and it's a very big one, is a response to a pollution spill. An incident happens. They may not even been really aware of the stream and all of its intricacies. And now all of a sudden there's a pollution spill and, oh geez, what's going on? What do we do about it? And, a good example of a pollution spill situation is Specks Run in West Virginia, which is where in 2020, 30 truckloads of drilling mud were dumped into this small little tributary in the Peckin Creek watershed in Berkeley County, West Virginia. It's only about 1.5 miles long stream before it hits the Peckin, and it literally filled the stream from bank to bank for 1.5 miles. What you can see there is, the mud just completely filled the bank, and the base of that stream is about 2.5 feet down right there in the center. So you can imagine the amount of mud that was spilled during the spoils were dumped in a spot. It rained heavily. It all washed right into the creek and just completely filled the creek, decimating all the aquatic life, all the macroinvertebrates, all the aquatic species. Pushed all the fish out, I would hope, into the Peckin Creek. And there's going to be a long cleanup process. You have crews that were out there for months and months and months cleaning, and it's going to take some time for that small stream to bounce back. And so the Peckin Watershed Group is out there planning to collect water quality data for the next year or so to see how this stream bounces back from such a massive pollution event. So what do we do as river keepers? What kind of information do we collect, and how do we use that information? And for the longest time, we really focus on targeted monitoring, especially when it comes to traditional water quality monitoring or collecting data or evidence for violations. We focus on a discharge point or a permit holder for a discharge, or we see a spill and we want to be able to target that situation. But the vast majority of what we do is observational monitoring, and that's really, really important, because observational monitoring through images and just being present on the water is extremely important. And that's why we patrol our rivers and streams on a regular basis. That's why we fly in airplanes and fly drones, and that's why we're out there boots on the ground checking out the stream and water quality and assessing how things are changing given the current status of weather and other things. We also have been embarking on a long-term water quality monitoring program, which I think is great that Potomac Riverkeeper Network is starting to move into this, and I'll touch on that here in a few. So with targeted monitoring, their focus is looking at collecting data, collecting water samples, sending those samples to a certified lab so that we get high quality results from those samples, so that we can use that in our cases when we see violations to an NPDES permit. Which is basically a discharge permit that is held by various different industries like wastewater treatment plants and other processing plants. So we want to be able to have that high level quality results that we can measure up against water quality standards. But before we do that measuring, I really wanted to kind of talk about numerical versus narrative, because I think that's really important. So our targeted monitoring focuses on numerical data. We are looking at collecting water samples, testing that water sample for various different pollutions to come up with a concentration of that pollutant in that sample. And that's important because we have water quality standards at the state and federal level that we measure that concentration of pollutant to. And if that measurement, if we're above that standard, then that's a violation of the Clean Water Act. That's a violation of state pollution control laws. It's a measurable violation. Now, there is also the narrative water monitoring data. And these are important observations that we collect when we're at the stream side. We're initially collecting that sample. What's the condition of the river? Is it cloudy? You know, even temperature is considered an observation. But it's that visual observation. We do that through images. We do that through our river patrols. We do that through drone and airplane flyovers, and visually observing pollution impacts, visually observing changes. But also, besides just observations, it's also an actual standard. A narrative water quality standard does exist in all states and in the Clean Water Act. It's essentially is these physical impacts that you can see or smell to a stream. And that could be cloudy, that oily sheen that you see from an oil spill, you know, high levels of algae is one we're trying to push. You know, a whole host of different narrative standards. It can be described visually that it's impacting that stream. So here's an example of a visual violation that we have used that actually violated the Pennsylvania narrative standard. This is a basalt mining company called Specialties Granule Incorporated. It's in Fairfield, Pennsylvania, and it discharges into Mining Branch, which is a tributary to the Monocacy and then the Potomac. So essentially, after a rainy day in 2018, you can see in the upper left-hand corner that stream was cloudy green. And this was based on an observational monitoring program by the local citizens that went out after every rain event or even during a rain event to look at the water quality, do some visual observation. And even we have collected, they did actually collect some water samples to send in into an actual certified lab. So after this pollution event did occur, we see this green murky color. I took the drone up and I flew to that edge of that stormwater pond that I showed you in the previous picture. And at the edge of that stormwater pond, you can see the rocky path on the right on the other picture. And that is the permitted discharge. But you can also see this other small little stream that's kind of flowing off to the side. That's an unpermitted discharge. That is not allowed. That was illegal. And that was actually something that happened with a discharge point on the pond. And it, you know, it's not permitted whatsoever. But you can also see in the background the stream that's flowing, that's nice and crystal clear. And so I did some ground truthing and followed a little stream walk, and you can see the milky white unpermitted discharge in the back compared to the stream, which is nice and clear. And then we move over to the other picture, and that is the rocky path emerging into the Mining Branch, and you can also see the same milky white substance. Now, what was really remarkable about this situation is that there were no water quality standard violations of their permit, none whatsoever. I mean, one could argue that the numerical limits were too high for that permit, and I would agree, because obviously we have some significant level of pollution that's visually impacting Mining Branch. And so therefore, this is a violation of the narrative standards for Pennsylvania. And we were able to use that with a notice of intent to file a lawsuit under the Clean Water Act to SGI. And they, oh, there we go. Almost lost the picture there. And so then we have this result where the industry paid over $250,000 to install a 5-stage sand filtration system because of our visual evidence. And also I wanted to bring up that this visual evidence was primarily from our drone. Our drone captured the violation. Our drone captured the unpermitted discharge. And that was the sole basis for our lawsuit or our notice of intent. And this is a great result. Probably the only quarry operation that I know of that actually has a sand filtration system for the discharge. in the Potomac watershed and the surrounding watersheds. But we also have other examples of observational information that has made some significant changes through various different state processes. Now, here's a great example from the Shenandoah Riverkeeper, Mark, and the great work from Alan Lehman, who is our agricultural stewardship manager. Observations showed this confined animal cattle operation with a stream flowing right through the fenced-in area, and all that waste during a rain event will flow into that small stream and into the Shenandoah River. And after a submission of a complaint to Virginia Department of Environmental Quality, they came out, and after a lot of pushing, it wasn't that easy, but there was a lot of pushing, they came out and they fenced off the stream. And as you can see in the more green picture, there's more grass, and you can see the fence surrounding that tributary. And you know, that's a great outcome. That is how we were able to use visual information to make a significant change. Also, again, from the Shenandoah Riverkeeper, we have a before and after of a stream bank restoration based on just removing the cows from getting that access to the river. And because of that removal and fencing of those cows out, you now see a much greener, lusher streamside bank that is going to control the pollutants during a rain event, and you're not going to have as much pollution going into that section of the Shenandoah. Another example of visual observations that we had used is the DNL coal discharge violation. This is a site where it's up on the North Branch Potomac in Luke, Maryland, where they store coal to take to the paper plant that was in operation but has since shut down. But they would take this, and this is all in 2020, they would take the coal there, burn the coal, and that kind of thing. So this is like the storage station. Well, after some observations of initial color discharge into the stream, we tracked the flow. What was going on? Stormwater flow coming from these coal spoil piles into Sump C, which is basically a drainage ditch. And then it would overflow during a rain event and follow the purple path all the way to the stream. And after one major rain event, as I sat there for hours and hours and hours waiting for the rain event to finish, I took the drone up right away and collected some visual information showing the discharge from the sump and coming from the coal piles. And you can see the images there close up and far away that it really did stretch quite a ways away. And essentially the violation here, we didn't collect any water samples to show or prove in a violation. What we had to show is that they did not sample after a discharge, and by their permit they're required to collect a sample. And we proved that, oh look, it discharged, they didn't collect a sample, they're in violation of the permit. So therefore we sent a notice of intent, and they since had cleaned up the site in 2020 by October. They removed all the coal piles, they removed all the coal that has been on that ground for a long time, and basically reclaimed the site and have permanently closed that site. So they are no longer going to be piling coal there that they have been doing for 80 years, 80 years of operation. That was a very powerful win in 2020. But we also have a lot going on in the lower Potomac and Dean Nyack's area, Potomac Riverkeeper, especially at the Morgantown power plant. They are out there visually observing, canoeing, trying to find this discharge that's coming into the small stream that is going right into the Potomac River. And this stream, this multicolored iron heavy, it looks like polluted water body, is this receiving ditch of stormwater and other pollutants from the actual site itself. You can see it's right next to the railroad track, and just at the top of the picture is where the wetland is, back there behind the big power lines that Dean and Alan were paddling up. And so, you know, visually observing and visually collecting information to try and find these violations is a big component of what we do. But besides the visual observations, we have something wonderful. It's called the Swimmable Potomac campaign, where Dean Nyack's and others are focused on collecting some weekly bacteria monitoring in the DC area at key recreational hotspots. And the point here is to try and provide community awareness of river health. It's to provide people with that information to say, hey, can I get out on the river this weekend? So information is collected every Wednesday, it's tested on Thursday, and then it's reported out on the Swim Guide app, which you can download on your phone, and you can see, hey, does it pass the muster? Can we get in the river at these various different locations? And we're also going to use that information, that numerical information. This is numerical. We're going to use that information to advocate to decision makers to lift the ban in the DC area and for swimming in the Potomac water. But before we do that, before we have that numerical evidence that we want to be able to really use, we have to make sure that that numerical evidence is very rigorous. And that's why we have a quality assurance project plan. This QAP for short, it outlines the what, the where, the how, and the why we collect samples. It essentially is assuring the public and the users and the government agencies that the data that we're collecting is of high quality. And under that QAP is a standard operating procedure. These are these procedures that are outlined of how to collect the sample, how to test the sample, how to clean up after we test the sample, and how do we use and measure that data, and how we make sure that the data is quality assured. And so what's great about this DC monitoring program is it is a volunteer-based water quality monitoring program. We have volunteers out there that have take ownership of a site, and we have volunteers that are taking command at our lab, which is the floating water quality lab called the Seadog. Yes, we have a water quality lab on a boat. I mean, we're a Riverkeeper organization, so we got to have that, right? So we have this high quality professional lab on the Seadog, and essentially it is high quality because we have been certified by the Virginia Department of Environmental Quality for Tier 3 certified data. That means that the bacteria data that we collect and the data that we collect for turbidity is a defensible water quality data that we can use legally, that the state can use to also show that there are violations and other issues. And this is, again, all based on our high level of training, our quality assurance project plan, and the volunteers that tirelessly support this program. So this is a great example of a high quality numerical water quality monitoring program. But we also have, my favorite, the PRKM drone surveillance program. I've been flying drones for about 5 years, and we, after some legal advice from some law firm that we work with on a regular basis, they said, hey, you should really have a commercial license. So I have a commercial license, and me with that commercial license, I was able to put together this internal surveillance program for Potomac Riverkeeper Network. We have our own standard operating procedures, just like a water quality monitoring program. We have annual training. We have a pre and post flight procedures that we have to follow to make sure that we're checking for spatial awareness or where the airspace is that we're flying in. We also have additional rules besides the rules that we have to follow through the FAA laws. So we have additional rules, and these rules are guidelines for us to make sure that the public is aware we recognize the priority that they have in their privacy. And so we have no flights below 100 feet. We stay 200 feet lateral from all structures, and that we also always have landowner permission if we're going to fly over private property. We never fly over residential homes. And there's a whole number of other rules that we follow in this program, just to make sure that that the public is aware that we're doing things safely. And upcoming is training the Riverkeepers also on how to collect water samples with the drone, which I have done, and it's a lot of fun. So again, the importance here is training. It's training the Riverkeepers for safe operation, but not just the Riverkeepers. This program also opens it up for volunteers with their drones to be a part of this program. So it's not just an internal guidance, it's going to also be allowed for volunteers to come in and work with us to do some projects, surveillance techniques, and water sampling. So coming almost to a close here, the other kind of monitoring that we do is, monitoring for advocacy. And, this is a little bit different because we are collecting information. We're collecting numerical information on a pollutant that doesn't necessarily have a water quality standard yet. But there is so much research out there that is showing that there are problems with this various pollutant. And that, for me and our organization has been PFAS, where there's about 9,000 compounds of this polyfluoral chain, which is a chain of fluorines and carbon atoms that really is a waterproofing. It is an AFFF, which is a firefighting foam. It's in that Tefal cookware that we all use for decades. And I think I probably have some back in the storage still. It's in our Gore-Tex material, and Gore-Tex was hugely popular and still is for waterproofing material. It's in personal care products and especially in packaging products, but it's also in our drinking water, and it's also in our rivers and our streams, and it's in our wastewater. Doing some sampling in 2019, we found that there, were significant levels between 2 and 6 parts per trillion. That's a whole nother PowerPoint, is to get into PFAS, but that's a really small number, and this is a bioaccumulative kind of pollutant, and therefore small numbers matter because it will build up. But we also found extremely high numbers in some surface water in the Martinsburg area. And this is all due to the firefighting foam that was used at the Air National Guard base there in Martinsburg for decades and decades. But with this kind of monitoring program, what we do is we ask questions. We collect evidence, we collect information, and then we go, all right, what's going on? If it's in the water, is it in the fish? So we're always asking questions about this kind of data before we use this data and we go to the decision makers. So, continuing on the path of PFAS and collecting samples and assessing what's going on, we collected some samples at Hagerstown Wastewater Treatment Plant, Smithsburg, the Antietam Creek, and we compared that information with EPA guidance that's out there. We also looked at fish plasma, which are extremely high levels of PFAS, and we still, again, asked the question, if it's in these 2 small wastewater treatment plants in a rural area, it's got to be in your more urban wastewater treatment plants. And so we use this information and to ask these questions so that we can develop a plan of action, a campaign. And right now we are in that process of developing that campaign to push the state of Maryland to develop water quality standards, drinking water quality standards for PFAS, and also to start investigating the high levels of PFAS in fish species, in our wastewater treatment plants, and in biosolids. So that's a whole lot about monitoring, and I am completely open to questions.
Okay. I'm gonna go ahead and let people unmute themselves too. Just if folks want to ask questions that way too, but I'm gonna read the questions in the chat first.
Okay.
Okay. So one from Lisa: have you been able to use the drones yet to collect physical samples for testing?
Yes, actually, I have been able to use the drone. I attach actually what we have right here in this picture is I'm lowering down a well sampler, which is a long tube that you lower down into a well and you collect a sample. It's got a ball bearing on the end. And that's the same exact kind of sampling device that I put on a braided steel wire, attach it to the drone, fly over a location and collect a water sample, bring it back to me, pour it into another clean, certified sample bottle, ready to be shipped off to the lab. Now, there are some situations though where this is not going to work, or we haven't really tested it. So, we have to be in a very public place and we have to be able to see where we collect the sample. So it's going to be your major river systems. Although, there are times that I want to sample some stormwater ponds, but we haven't really approached the legality if that's, if we have the ability to do that or not. But yes, I have used it. and it's a wonderful way to use the drone.
Okay. So next question. I think some states have tried to outlaw drone use over animal agriculture facilities to thwart animal rights activists from filming over their facilities. Has industry in this area tried to do something similar to block PRKN's monitoring by drone?
No, they haven't. There hasn't been any active actions to stop drones from flying over agricultural properties. But at the same time, too, we want to respect these agricultural properties. And so we do have a drone program where we have to really assess a site. We take off from a public road or a public access point or from adjacent landowner with their permission. And, we don't want to necessarily always be hovering and flying over the property. However, there is no federal airspace restrictions over a lot of agricultural areas. And so that's why in an airplane, you can still fly over, but you're flying over about 700 to 800 feet. The drones, we fly at a max of 400 feet. Still quite high, and we can still get a lot of really good images, but there are no violations of airspace in that area. Now, unless there is some county zoning ordinances, or if a industrial facility files to the FAA to have a restricted airspace around their property, those are two possibilities. So hopefully they're not listening and I gave them a hint.
Okay. Does anyone else have any other questions?
I have one.
Yeah, go ahead, Lisa.
Hi, I was wondering, how does one find out about your classes that you teach?
For the drone program?
Yes.
Well, that's a really good question. We have not made an official program to go out to the public to train the public, but I think that's something that we want to do. And so I know that we're developing a new website, and we might have that added on there. But I think that's a really good idea. I think come this spring we can probably do a open up to the public and with their drones to do a volunteer drone monitoring program with the organization. So stay tuned.
Thank you.
On that line of volunteering or working with PRKN, can you let folks know how they can get involved in the water quality monitoring program and rapid response program?
Sure, yeah. So I did mention the rapid response program. I don't know a whole lot about it. That is definitely Dean Nyack. He's the Potomac Riverkeeper. That is his baby. The DC monitoring program is definitely his baby. So I think reaching out to Dean and getting involved with the monitoring in the DC area and follow through. I think our training program is virtual right now because of COVID, but they might have some in-person trainings later on. And yeah, I would recommend getting in touch with Dean to sign up for volunteering. Now, I'm working on developing a monitoring program here in the Upper Potomac. I want to be able to collect water samples at all the river access points along the C&O Canal from Cumberland to Shepherdstown or Harper's Ferry, and a couple other very popular locations on the Antietam Creek that seems to be very worthwhile in collecting bacteria information. So that's something I'm working on for the Upper Potomac, and hopefully we'll have something up and running by 2022.
Hey, Brent, this is Carl Sheeter. Just to jump in real quickly, in terms of helping out with water quality monitoring and the rapid response team down in the sort of the DC area, the Potomac. Lisa Wu and myself are kind of starting to pull together the 2021 plan. Lisa will be taking the lead on the lab and coordinating the volunteers. I'll be working on fleshing out the rapid response team related program to that. So for folks who are interested, they can reach out to Lisa Wu or myself. And I think, the first step is to get people involved in the basic water quality monitoring program so we can train them, test them, certify them. And then depending on what schedules or preferences they've got, we can work to have them involved in the rapid response team. This is the first year for the RRT, so we're still figuring out a lot of the details as well. But I think there's as you've shown, there's a lot of potential opportunity to go off and do some testing when certain events occur beyond sort of the standard rain runoff. So
yeah, definitely. Well, thank you, Carl, for bringing that up, and thank you and Lisa for really putting so much effort into our volunteer monitoring program. I mean, it without your guys' help, it just would not be operational for us. So kudos to you two and all the other volunteers that are putting so much time into it. It is not easy to religiously collect samples on a weekly basis and schedule those to be in the lab to do the testing on a weekly basis all summer long. That is an intensive monitoring schedule. So I appreciate all the work you guys are doing.
Yeah, just to add on that, I think trainings are normally in April, May kind of area. And we'll be advertising that on our e-news and our social media as well too. So you can follow that along. If you don't get our e-news, I had everyone do a question about whether or not you're interested. So you should be added, or you will be added once I do it. Or you can go ahead and sign up on our website as well. Okay. The first water quality monitoring session is scheduled for May 5th. All right.
Excellent.
Yep. Okay. So another question. So what plans do you have to continue PFAS testing to determine trends in the areas you've tested? What lab provided the PFAS measurements, and can they support broader sampling for PRKN?
Yes. So we have to pay for these samples. They are not cheap by any means. It's about $350 to $400 a sample. We were very fortunate to have Peer, which is, you guys can help me out with the acronym. I'm forgetting the acronym right now. It's an organization that works with other organizations to really understand the impacts to our water bodies and our human health. They paid for these samples. The samples were sent to a lab in Pennsylvania, Pace Environmental, I believe it is. And we get about 13 or 14 substances in that 9,000 that's out there tested. These are the more popular ones, the more that we have information on that are pollutants and to our aquatic species and to us. So the goal moving forward right now is to continue to look at other wastewater treatment plants to see if there are more PFAS levels, and to also try and get a hold of some biosolid samples or some sludge samples from these treatment plants to show that sure enough there is high levels of PFAS that we suspect are in these the sludge, this after material that's collected from wastewater treatment plants and sometimes turn into a biosolid and put it onto a farm field. We're also really interested in some of the further research that's being done by USGS fisheries biologist Vicki Blazer, who's going to be looking at already collected samples over the years from various different locations and doing some further testing on PFAS levels in fish tissue in various different species, not just smallmouth bass, so that we can kind of understand the impact of PFAS on various different fish species and in the locations to do any kind of correlation assessment. So we're wanting to take all that information and we're wanting to make sure that the state of Maryland has that information so we can push them to move faster on doing their assessments. We have some ideas about trying to get that information out there, maybe a PFAS lecture road show or more of these Water Wednesdays. What we want to do is just really educate the people about PFAS in general, and then to have their support and their help in motivating MDE in the state of Maryland to move faster. I mean, they've had about 5 years since the EPA Clean Water Act guidance came out on PFAS, PFOA, and PFOS, and they're just now getting into the assessment stage. So, and they need to move faster. Hopefully that answers
Brent,
your
it's
question.
Mark.
Hey, Mark.
Yeah, good presentation. Going back to the drone usage for a second, The thing that I just wanted to point out is the use of it as a tool. It's just a real force multiplier. And in the agricultural community, I mean, I've gotten a number of calls from farmers, you know, calling from an unknown phone number saying, have you, you know, quit flying over our farms, when we in fact haven't been flying over their farms. But it makes them start thinking about doing the right thing, whereas before they might be hiding large poultry piles behind the barn that you couldn't see from the road, and now they're wondering about it. You know, can what they're doing that's wrong and in violation, can they in fact be caught? And so the fact that they know that we are using drones, it has an interesting psychological implication for it. So.
Yeah, no, that's very interesting, and especially since we weren't the ones flying the drones that are over their property, which makes you kind of wonder who's flying those drones. But yeah, I think that's a really good perspective to assess, and I think that's also the reason why we have this, you know, outline program, is to say, hey, look, we have these guidelines that we follow, and you know, to try and reassure them that, look, you know, we're not gonna fly our drone and herd your cattle somewhere, or you know, and you know, really become a nuisance. What we want to do is just make sure that you're following the law, make sure that you're being a good steward of the land and of the water.
Yep.
Yes, indeed.
So more interest in your volunteer drone monitoring program. So there are people who are definitely interested in it.
Okay.
I don't know this question, Lisa, so I'm just going to punt it to Brent. What type of drone model do you use?
Well, it is a DJI Mavic 2 Zoom. I have one, so does Mark. We had one for Dean, but his got lost in the swamp by Atreyu, and it's never to be seen again. But you know, and that happens. There are times that we, you know, this is a device, this is a tool that we can use, and there are going to be problems down the road with these things. And so that's why we try and make sure that we fly as safely as possible. We don't want to harm property, we don't want to harm persons, and we want to make sure that we're doing the right thing with this kind of tool.
Brent, maybe in the future, we'll have enough muscles that we can figure out how to use those as collecting devices for PFAS chemicals and other pollutants in the water.
Well, yeah, I mean, that's definitely a conceivable possibility. I know Nancy was really interested in getting a underwater drone for us at one time, and that would be super duper cool, because there are a lot of times we will have discharge pipes that are under the water, they're under the river, that we can't see, and you know, maybe having an underwater drone would be of interest. And you know, it's been a thing of mine to try and figure out a way to put more monitoring equipment on a drone. I think it has an immense capability for that kind of a platform. But you know, we are an advocacy organization. We are thin and streamlined, and we want to collect those samples and get to the business of cleaning up the river. And so, you know, a lot of that research and development we can't really do. And so that's why we want to take something that's so stock and do something very important, like collecting a water sample with a stock drone, that we can use to our advantage.
Okay. Next question, is there a rapid response team for the Upper Potomac?
Well, that's a really good question. Carl, Lisa, I do not know a whole lot about the rapid response, to be honest, in detail. But what I can probably tell you on the surface is that it is a way of working with volunteers and citizens in the community to try and rapidly respond to a pollution situation, to collect visual information about that, and possibly even water quality sampling. So Carl, I don't know if you could step in and
Sure.
talk a little bit more.
Yeah, the short answer to the question is no. There isn't a rapid response team for the Upper Potomac at this point.
Oh, but that was okay. Sorry, my bad.
Oh no,
No, there's not.
no, but it does lead to what is the AOR, if you will, of what we're trying to start up, and it's a great question. because, as you can imagine, this is something where you, without any longer strategic view of it, you could get yourself spread too thin too quickly, and we don't want to do that. So we're going to be focusing, and I believe Dean wants us focusing in 2 counties to start with, Charles County and Montgomery County. And so we're going to use those as our sort of, I'll say, test bed this summer. But it's important because it's if a event gets reported by someone in the community, we want to be able to at least acknowledge that we've gotten a report, and then decide if we should or can go out and do testing with the resources that we've got. And then the second question is, and then what do you do, right? So if you find something, you've got some pollution, who in the county do you need to go to report it and get some type of response, so someone takes some action? And as you all can imagine, that differs county to county. So that's why we've been trying to keep it somewhat focused on these 2 counties to start with, so we can establish what's the protocol for what we do once we get results. We've worked closely with Philip to develop what I'll say the legal response is, but what's the communication strategy after that, in terms of getting in touch with the counties and then following up on it. So that's where it stands for this summer, and stay tuned. There'll be more to follow.
Great, Carl. Thank you very much. Yeah, I mean, essentially it is using the power of volunteers to rapidly respond to a pollution complaint, which we as Riverkeepers do. But we have a whole lot of other projects and programs that we're doing, and sometimes we can't always get out there immediately. And so now it's kind of like a dial list. You have this list of volunteers that someone can manage, and they get that report in, right, Carl? And say, all right, you go. And do you have time to go? Do you have time to go? And you just send somebody out there immediately for that pollution situation.
No, and you hit a really good point there, understanding, if you will, the workflow of this, because, we do want to be what the name describes. We do want to be rapid. We don't want to let it be something that, we get a tip from someone and it sits for, weeks on end.
Yep.
We want to be able to respond quickly, and that involves identifying who's got what responsibilities and authorities, and who has the available time of the volunteers, and coupling that with the existing resources of using the Seadog, which is the plan. We don't want to take away at all from the weekly testing, right, that we're going to be doing this summer. And so Lisa and I will be coordinating on all of that very closely. So I think it'll be good. I think we've got all the right pieces in place to do an initial operating capability of the RRT this summer. So
good. That's very good. Excellent.
Yeah. This is a brand new program. Dean, our Potomac Riverkeeper, and Carl tested it out a little bit, last year, but this is the first time the program's ever being formalized. So I think there's a lot of capacity to expand it in the future, but we're trying it out for now. Does anyone else have any last questions before we kind of wrap things up? Wait a minute. Takes a second to type.
Well, I just want to say, though, that, we've had a lot of success in 2020. A lot of, you would think that for a COVID pandemic year that we'd be a little bit more sedentary and not get things done. But, we still are able to get out there and collect information and solve problems on a regular basis. And, that's to the credit of our volunteers, it's to the credit of our staff, that being able to just tirelessly get out there and do the work. So, so any other questions? If anyone has any questions about drones or PFAS monitoring or anything like that, you can always contact me by email, and I'd be happy to go into more detail.
Yeah, and let me just add my thanks to all the groups that are helping us with the water quality monitoring and getting our rapid response moving, all the volunteers on the call. I wanted to pick up on Lisa Wu's question about mussels. I thought that was a very interesting question. So I was just afraid maybe we hadn't explained that a little bit. So we have a freshwater mussel restoration program that we piloted in National Harbor and expect to expand in National Harbor and the Wharf this year. And that is primarily a program to remove pollutants because mussels are filter feeders. So these are native mussels that we're restoring through that program. But Lisa's question is a really good one, because one of the things that the state of Maryland is going to do is measure the amount of nutrients that are being taken up by the mussels, so that we know whether it could be a best management practice for removing nutrient pollution from the rivers to help clean up the rivers and the bay. So we could also look for other things, as Lisa suggested. And there seemed to be a lot of interest in PFAS. I just wanted to say that we have heard from a lot of people that they would like to have their drinking water, or particularly private wells, tested for PFAS. It's a very expensive endeavor, as Brent said, but people who live near air bases in particular are concerned because of the use of PFAS chemicals in firefighting. So if anybody's interested in that and potentially helping with that, please let us know. But that was a fantastic presentation. I knew it would be, but that was just great. And I want to thank everybody for joining us, and particularly all the volunteers who help us do this work, which we couldn't do without all of you and the support that you provide to PRKN. So thanks again. We'll have another Water Wednesday next month, right, Emily?
Yep, on River Access.
On River Access. I hope you can join us for that too. Thanks a lot.
Excellent. Thank you all.
Thanks,
Have a good
everyone.
one. Enjoy that warm weather.